Hey guys, welcome to another session on FMT. Today we'll discuss identification of a person. In this we'll restrict ourselves to determination of sex of the person. You should be able to define and describe corpus delicti, establishment identity of a person including race, religion, complexion and sex. Let's begin with a case study. Skeletonized body parts were found in a wooded mountainous area with bones scattered in about 20 meter square area. There were no personal effects that could point to the identity of that person. The remains were collected and arranged in an anatomical fashion and identity of the person was attempted. The question that has been raised, as a forensic pathologist, what is your opinion regarding the sex of the person from the given skull? So have a close look and then we will discuss at the end of this session. This is a skeleton which was found and you have been given a skull to try to find the sex of that person from the skull. Now for some definition, identification is the determination of the individuality of the person based on certain physical characteristics. So you are determining the individuality of the person and it is based on certain physical characteristic. It can be complete, that is absolute fixation of the individuality of a person, or it may be partial. Ascertainment of only some facts like race, sex, age, stature, while the others still remain unknown. So you know some facts, but you are not able to identify the person properly in whole. So it is called partial identification or incomplete identification. So why identification is necessary? In living person, for criminal cases like persons accused of assault, murder, rape, interchange of newborn babies in the hospital, impersonation cases, absconding soldiers and criminals. So you want to identify who is this person. In civil cases, marriage, passport or license, inheritance, insurance claim, missing person and disputed sex. In the dead, identification is required in case of fire, explosions and accidents, when an unknown dead body is found on the roads, fields, railway compartment or in the water, in cases of decomposed body, in case of mutilated bodies and if it is a skeleton. Before identify the accused in the court of law, the doctor should verify the identification marks noted by him. Now there is a term which comes as a short note for you. What is corpus delicti? Body of offense or the essence of any crime. That is corpus delicti. That is the facts of any criminal offense. In charge of homicide, it includes positive identification of the dead body, that this is this person only and no one else, and proof of its death by some criminal act of the accused. The term includes body of the victim, the bullet or a broken knife blade, the clothing showing marks of the weapon or photograph showing the fatal injuries. The main part of the corpus delicti is the establishment of identity of the body and infliction of violence in a particular way at a particular time and place by person or persons charged with the crime and no one else. The identification of the dead body and the proof of corpus delicti is essential before sentence is passed, since in trials any unclaimed body or a decomposed body or a portions of the dead body or bones may be produced as to support a false charge. Now what is the identification data? Race and religion, age, sex, teeth, general development and stature, anthropometric measurements, fingerprints, footprints and any external peculiarities, speech and voice, memory and education, handwriting, gait, manner and habit. This speech, voice, memory, education, handwriting, gait, manner, it is possible only in a living person. Personal effects like clothes, pocket contents, jewelry. Sex, age and stature are said to be the primary characteristics of identification. Sex, age and stature. They are said to be a primary characteristic of identification. Race and religion, important in cases of mass disasters. Example, in case of railway accident, air crash, when a person of different races traveling together. It is determined by clothing. Traditional Indian dress is different from Western dress. Even in India, people can be identified of their place of origin from nature and manner of wearing the dress. Complexion, skin is black in Negroes, brown in Indians and fair in Europeans. In the eye, the Indians have dark or brown iris and Europeans have blue or grey iris. Skeletal, there is a very important index which is known as the cephalic index. So cephalic index or the index of breadth. What's that? It is a ratio between the maximum transverse breadth of the skull. You are taking the breadth of the skull and the maximum anterior-posterior diameter of the skull. So maximum transverse breadth and the maximum anterior-posterior length into 100 gives the cephalic index of that skull. It is helpful to determine the race of that person. So cephalic index is useful to find out the racial difference from the skull shape. So maximum transverse breadth of the skull divided by maximum anterior-posterior length of the skull into 100 is the cephalic index. Indian skull is Caucasian with few negroid character. So it is Caucasian and with few negroid characters. So what are the types of skull based on cephalic index? The dolichocephalic, where the cephalic index is 70 to 74.9 and the skull, the race of the skull are the negroid. The Negroes, the Aryans, the Aborigines, they are included under this, the dolichocephalic or the long-headed skull. Next we have the mesaticephalic or the medium-headed. Here the cephalic index is 75 to 79.9. Race that is included are the Caucasoids. Here we have the European, Chinese as well as the Indians, the Caucasoids. The third one is the brachycephalic or the short-headed. The cephalic index is 80 to 84.9. The short-headed, they have got the cephalic index from 80 to 84.9. And the race included in this are the Mongoloids. We have the Mongolians and the Native Americans. We have another category which is also known as the hyperbrachycephalic, but they are very rare. The maximum anterior-posterior length, which is measured by a vernier calipers. That gives the cephalic index. So religion, how to classify or identify a person based on religion, they are sometimes very difficult. Hindu males are not circumcised, sacred thread, necklace of wooden beads, caste mark on forehead, piercing of earlobes may be there. Muslim males are normally circumcised, have marks of corns and callosities on the lateral aspect of the knees. Hindu females put on saris, vermilion on head, silver toe ornaments, tattoo marks, nose ring aperture in the left nostril, and few openings of earrings along the helix. In Muslim females, put on trousers, no vermilion mark, nose ring in the septum, several openings on the helix for earrings, and there is usually no tattoo marks. But it can be varied. Now let's discuss an MCQ. Cephalic index for Indian people. We have discussed it is Caucasian with few negroid characters. So that means it comes into the mesaticephalic group. So the options given are A 70 to 75, B 75 to 80, and C 80 to 85, and D 85 to 90. So mesaticephalic is 75 to 80. So the answer will be B. Right? Now we come to determination of sex of the person. There is some terminology you should be aware of. Sex is the biological term denoting the genetic, physiologic or anatomical characteristic of an individual based on which we identify ourselves as males or females. So it is a biological term depending on genetic, physiologic or anatomical characteristics. That is the sex with the male, female. Gender is the sociologic construct that denotes how an individual identifies according to the social norm. Sexual identity of an individual from birth to puberty and then to adulthood. It is the intermingling of sexual characters of either sex in one individual to a varying degree, including the physical form, reproductive organs and sexual behavior. So in one person there will be intermingling of the behavior of both the sexes. Davidson divided intersex into 4 types: gonadal agenesis, gonadal dysgenesis, true hermaphroditism and pseudo-hermaphroditism. Agenesis means when there is no development of any gonads, no testes, no ovaries are there. Dysgenesis, development is there but they were not functional at the time of puberty, and most common example is the Klinefelter syndrome or the Turner syndrome because of some abnormalities in the chromosome. So Klinefelter XY and Turner's XO. They are examples of gonadal dysgenesis. True hermaphroditism when both the sexes are there. It may be ovotestis may be there. So the external characters may be also be that of both the sexes. Pseudo-hermaphroditism can be male pseudo-hermaphroditism or female. Male is that when the testis is there but the outward look is that of a female. And female pseudo-hermaphroditism is that when the ovaries are there but the outward look is that of a male. It happens because of some enzyme deficiency or some hormonal effects. Disorders of sexual development. This is the current terminology that is used instead of hermaphroditism or pseudo-hermaphroditism. So this current terminology is disorders of sexual development. DSD is a broad term encompassing any condition where external genitalia are atypical in relation to chromosome or the gonads. Currently, the term DSD is used to substitute the obsolete nomenclature of intersex, hermaphrodite or pseudo-hermaphrodite. You are not going to use this term, but use the term DSD. Why determination of sex is necessary? It is necessary because of the following reasons, like identification in living or dead, for deciding whether an individual can exercise certain civil rights extending to one sex only, for participation in sports, very, very important. So any sports activity, we have got male and female category. You cannot expect the male to compete in the female category. So there is some requirement to segregate them into male and female. For deciding questions relating to legitimacy, divorce, paternity, marriage, impotence, rape and affiliation cases. The sex of a person can be determined from the physical morphology, the microscopic study of sex chromatin and gonadal biopsy. In normal cases, in the living, most certain evidence of sex is the position of ovaries in females and testes in males. If it is there, you can say it is male or female. Highly probable evidence of sex is position of sexual characters like developed breast, vagina in females, and in male distribution of hair and penis in males. Presumptive evidence of sex is outward expression of individual features and contours of face, clothes, voice, figure that may help you to identify whether it is male or female. So there is the presumptive evidence of sex. There may be some difficult situations, like identification of sex of an individual may become difficult in DST, natural or acquired like the hijras or jananas. There may be features resembling one sex and the internal gonads could be of other sex or both sexes. Transvestic, individual who cross-dresses for sexual gratification or maybe otherwise wants to be related with that sex. Transgender, individuals whose identity or gender expression not matching one's assigned sex. Transsexual, individuals who have undergone sex change surgeries or sex reassignment, male to female or female to male. Concealed sex, individuals who hide their real sex for a motive by cross-dressing. This can be detected by physical examination. And in cases of advanced decomposition and in skeletonized bodies, the sex can be determined in decomposed bodies by identifying uterus or prostate which can resist putrefaction and by examination of the skeleton. So here you can see this is transsexual. The male pattern of hair distribution is there in the abdomen and the pubic region with feminine looking external genitalia. The sex reassignment surgery done with opening for urethra and feminizing genitoplasty and penectomy. Now what are sex verification tests? We do not use the word gender verification test. They are the sex verification test, whether it is a male or female. The physical morphology, external examination is done to determine the sex. So you are going to examine the patient externally to determine whether it's male or female. Nuclear sexing or sex chromatin test, buccal epithelial cells or hair follicle cells are examined microscopically to detect the presence of Barr body. Gonadal biopsy, detection of the gonads and sex chromosome, that is the identification of testes and XY chromosome in males and ovary and XX chromosome in females. Confirmatory method for determining sex is gonadal biopsy. The gene-based test is the PCR is used to detect the SRY gene, that is the sex determining region of the Y chromosome, or you can determine the DYZ1 gene, the region of the Y chromosome, which is diagnostic. Assay of the testosterone level, the level of testosterone that is there in the body. For females, it should be less than 10 nanomoles per liter, lower than the lower limit of normal males. So less than 10 nanomole per liter. This has also been recommended in the games, also in Olympic games. If they want, there is some confusion, if there is some doubt, then they assay the testosterone level and should be less than 10 nanomoles per liter. Now, what is nuclear sexing? It's a method of sexing cells which help in determining sex in doubtful cases, decomposed bodies, mutilated bodies, and fragmentary remains. Bar body is a small planoconvex mass of chromatin lying near the nuclear membrane. So you can see in the image, it is the bar body here. It's a small planoconvex mass of chromatin lying near the nuclear membrane. Buccal smear is usually used in XO or the Turner syndrome. There will be no bar bodies, and in Klinefelter, which is XXY, there will be one bar body. Davidson or Smith body in females, neutrophil leukocytes contain a small nuclear attachment of drumstick form. You can see here is this small nuclear attachment which is there in the neutrophil leukocytes. Neutrophil leukocytes will contain this. It's our nuclear mass which is attached about 1 to 1.5 micron in diameter and attached to the nucleus by means of a thin filament. You can see that in the image. In decomposed bodies, sex chromatin cannot be ruled out, so it will be difficult to determine from decomposed bodies. Sex chromosome XX or XY can be determined in the cells that are dividing, like blood stains, cartilage, bone marrow, teeth pulp, or root of the hair. The hair follicles are used in cell sexing because they resist putrefaction, and both bar body and Y chromosome can be demonstrated. There are some dyes which are used. One is the quinacrine dihydrochloride, which is used for staining the Y chromosome. Quinacrine dihydrochloride. The fluorescent fuelgen reaction using the acriflavine shift reagent is used to stain the X chromosome. So if you scan 100 cells, this will be the percentage. Bar body will be seen in females in about 20 to 80% of the cells. Davidson body in about 3% of the cells. Fluorescent fuelgen reaction will be positive in about 50 to 70% of the cells, and quinacrine dihydrochloride will be positive in males in about 45 to 80% of the cells. Now, how to determine the sex from the skeletal remains? Recognizable sex difference appear after puberty. Among the long bones, femur is the most useful to determine the sex of the person. They have got larger and higher neck shaft angles in males. The femur head diameter is greater than 45 mm, and in females it is less than 41 mm. And the bicondylar width in males it is more than 78 mm, and in females it is less than 72 mm. How accurate to determine the sex from the bones? If you have the entire skeleton, this is based on Krogman. If you have the entire skeleton, it is 100%. You will be able to determine the sex 100% correct. If you have the skull and pelvis, it is 98%. If you have the pelvis alone, it is the best single bone, which is 95%. The skull bone, if you have the skull only, then 92%. Long bones, 80 to 85%. And if you have the long bones and pelvis, the accuracy rises to 98%. This is based on Krogman, as reported by the Krogman. Now let's see the sex difference that is present in the pelvis, skull and the mandible. It is usually asked in your exams and quite useful to determine the sex of the skeleton. In pelvis, there is a ventral arc in females, but this is absent in the males. The subpubic contour is straight, but it is concave in females. The ischiopubic ramus is broad and flat it is sharp and ridged. So here the ventral arc is usually in this region. This is the ventral arc which is seen in female. In this region is the ventral arc, and it is, you can see that it is sharp and ridged. The ischiopubic ramus is sharp and ridged. The obturator foramen is large and ovoid in case of males, but it is small and triangular. This is in the form of a triangle. The true pelvis is small in case of males, but is shallow and spacious for the female to accommodate the baby. Prominent in females. It is attachment for the anterior sacroiliac ligament. And this is the area where you will see the preauricular sulcus. Here you can think that this is like an auricle, the ear. Looks like an ear. This area is like an ear, and before that, preauricular. Before that is the sulcus. Is the sulcus for the attachment of the anterior sacroiliac ligament. It is prominent in case of females. Remember, it is a characteristic feature seen in female pelvis. The sacrum is long and narrow. It is short and broad in females. Long and narrow in case of males and short and broad in case of females. The subpubic angle, again very important mark or characteristic. Subpubic angle is less than 90 degree and V-shaped in case of males, but it is more than 90 degree and U-shaped in case of females. It is broad so that the baby can come out. The pubic bone is narrow and triangular in case of males, but it is broad and rectangular. Here you can see it is broad and in the shape of a rectangle. The greater sciatic notch is deep and acute. It is shallow and wide. Here you can see it is shallow and this is the greater sciatic notch and wide. The pelvic inlet is heart-shaped and it is elliptical. I have just enumerated the important differences. There are many more. You can consult the book where you can have the differences. So these are the important difference between male and female pelvis. You can see here in the image, it's a narrow V-shaped subpubic angle. It's usually less than 90 degree. This is seen in males. It's triangular. It's more of a triangle. The pubic bone, and it's a straight subpubic contour. Here you can see it is broad rectangular pubic bone, form of a rectangle. It's a wide U-shaped subpubic angle. So you can see that it is U-shaped in case of females. And this is the ventral arc that I mentioned, seen in the pubic bone. It is again a characteristic feature seen in female pelvis. So ventral arc is the slightly elevated ridge of bone that occurs on the ventral surface of the body of pubis. Then you can see here, it's a broad ischiopubic ramus, and in case of males, but it is sharp. The ischiopubic ramus is sharp, like here. It's very sharp. You can see it's very sharp. It's the greater sciatic notch in males. I have mentioned that it's narrow and deep, but here you can compare this with this. It is broad and shallow. The obturator foramen is triangular, like here in case of females, and it is also concave. The surface subpubic contour is concave. So these are the important difference seen in the pelvis of the male and female. Now let's move on to the male and female skull. Now what's the difference between the male and female skull? The general size is big and rugged in case of males. In female it is small and smoother. The nuchal crest, which is seen at the back, it is well-defined ridge or hook of bone as seen in male skull. This is a nuchal crest at the back. But it is absent or it has got a slight expression in case of females. The mastoid process, this is the mastoid process. It is medium to large in case of males. Mastoid process is medium to large in case of males, but is small to medium in case of females. The forehead is receding, rough, less rounded. So it will, if you see that, it is receding. It is not vertical as in seen, it is vertical, round and smooth in case of female. So it is receding. You can see here. The supraorbital margin is thick and rounded. This margin, this is thick and rounded. The supraorbital margin is sharp in case of female. Their margins are rounded. The supraorbital ridge or glabella, this is the glabella. It is pronounced anterior projection. So it is very pronounced. In case of male, it is very pronounced, but it is smooth or little or no projection. So here this projection is not there in case of females, but it is prominent, very prominent in males. The suprametal crest, here it is the suprametal crest, it extends over to the external auditory meatus. So this is the suprametal crest seen in male skull, but it will be absent in case of female skull. The orbits are square and small. This is, you can see, is like that of a square, and it is smaller, but in female it is round and large. So big eyes. The female is bigger eyes. The frontonasal junction, or the nasion is a very important distinction mark in male and female. You can see here, very characteristically, it is distinct angulation is seen. The nasion is distinct in case of male skulls. So you can see the angulation is very prominent. But this is not so prominent. It is smooth in case of female skull, smooth and curved. This angulation is not there. The palate is missing here. It is usually large, U-shaped in case of males, but it is small and parabolic in case of female skull. So these are the major or important difference seen in male and female skull. So you can see here the pronounced supraorbital ridge in case of male skull. It's very pronounced here. There is the defined nuchal crest. The back again is absent or less defined in case of female skull, and the mastoid process is large. In the mandible, the mental eminence is projecting. In the female skull, you can see it is smooth. There is no such projection of the supraorbital ridge. No such projection of the supraorbital ridge. There is slight expression of the nuchal crest, and the mastoid process, you can see, is very small. Now, what are the difference in the mandible between male and female? The general appearance, it is larger and thicker. It is smaller and thinner. The chin, that is symphysis menti, it is square or U-shaped. It is rounded in case of females. The angle of the body with ramus, it is known as the gonial angle. It is less obtuse, that is usually less than 125 degree, and it is very prominent. The angle is prominent, but it is more obtuse. It is greater than 125 degree in case of female mandibles. The ramus flexure, there is rearward angulation of the posterior border of the ramus. This is very important. Remember, ramus flexure is nowadays considered that one of the sex determinants of the mandible. There is rearward angulation of the posterior border of the ramus in male mandible, but it is straight ramus in case of female mandibles. So the ramus is straight, there is no posterior angulation in them. The angle of the mandible is everted in case of males, but is inverted in case of females. The ascending ramus is greater in breadth and smaller in breadth in case of females. From the image, you can see that the angle is less, angle is more here, but here is the ramus flexure. There is posterior angulation is seen in case of male mandible. So again, it is characteristic feature of male mandible. The indices which are useful for identification, just remember the names, it will be useful for your MCQ exam. To determine race, we have the cephalic index, the nasal index, the brachial index, crural index, the intermembral index, and the humerofemoral index. So these indexes or indices determine the race of the person. To determine sex, we have the ischiopubic index, the sciatic notch index. The ischiopubic index is also known as the Washburn index. Then the chilotic line index, the ilium index, sacral index, Kimura's base wing index that uses the sacrum again. The corporobasal index, again it uses the sacrum, sternal index and the palatine index. All these indices determine the sex of the person. And to determine species, we have the medullary index. So sometimes the MCQ may be asked which is used for race, which is used for sex. There may be odd one out. Now let's discuss an MCQ or image-based question. Identify the sex of the mandible. Just have a good look. You can see it is broad. You can see it is also straight. There is no posterior angulation. The markings are also not very prominent. The muscular attachment. So we can say that it is a female mandible. Now an MCQ. Pre-auricular sulcus is useful for determination of, and the options are A. Race, B. Sex, C. Stature, and D. Age. So we have just discussed, and you will be able to answer this. It is the sex of the person. So answer will be B. Pre-auricular sulcus is there in the pelvis. Now coming back to the case study. Skeletonized body parts were found in a wooden mountainous area with bones scattered in about 20 meter square area. There were no personal effects that could point to the identity. The remains were collected and arranged in an anatomical fashion, and identity of the person was attempted. And the questions that were raised: as a forensic anthropologist, what is your opinion regarding the sex of the person from the given skull? We have just been provided with the skull. So let's see whether we are able to find the sex of the person. So this is the skeleton which is found, and this is the skull. So here you can see, you should be able to identify the sex. You can see there is a distinct angulation is there. Attachment is very prominent. It's extending beyond the external auditory meatus, and this is also very prominent. Supraorbital ridge is prominent, angulation is prominent, the attachment is also there prominent. You can see the mandible. Let's see from here, it will more clear. The eyes, they are squarish. It shows prominent supraorbital margins, prominent profile of the glabella, and the zygomatic processes of the temporal bone arising from the external acoustic meatus. So it is going till here. So there is a distinct angulation of the frontonasal junction. So all this leads to that this is a male skull. This chin is U-shaped. There is prominent angle of the body with ramus. And you can see there is a distinct angulation. The rearward, the ramus flexure is there. So it is a male skull. The rearward angulation of the posterior border of the ramus is there. Now for some points to remember which will help you in your MCQ. Determination of race of the skull is done by cephalic index. Indian skull is Caucasian with few negroid characters, and cephalic index is between 75 to 79.9. So it is the mesocephalic skull. DSD is the external genitalia atypical in relation to chromosome and gonads. So disorders of sexual development is external genitalia is atypical in relation to chromosome or the gonads. Most certain evidence of sex is the position of ovaries in females and testes in males. Confirmatory method of sex determination is gonadal biopsy. So identification of sex chromosome. You can do a karyotyping. XX or XY can be determined in the cells that are dividing, like the blood stains, cartilage, bone marrow, tooth pulp, and hair root. Davidson body can be seen in neutrophils of females. Streak gonads are seen in gonadal dysgenesis, like in Klinefelter's or Turner syndrome. Most common DSD associated with male hypogonadism is Klinefelter syndrome, XXY. Most common DSD associated with female hypogonadism is Turner syndrome, which is XO. Accuracy of sexing based on skeletal remains, if you have the entire skeleton, then you will be 100% correct. The skull and pelvis, with only the skull and pelvis, will be 98%. Pelvis alone, which is the best single bone to identify the sex of that person, the accuracy is 95%. Important features to differentiate sex in skull is the supraorbital margin and the ridge, nasation and the nuchal crest. The important features to differentiate sex in pelvis is the preauricular sulcus, subpubic angle and the greater sciatic notch. Preauricular sulcus is prominent in females. Ashley's rule, which is known as the 149 rule, is the used for determination of sex from the sternum for Europeans. In males, it is more than 149 mm. So that's why it's known as a 149 rule. So in males, it is more than 149 mm and in female, it is less than 149 mm. I hope you have understood today's session. Thank you.